The trade deadline has come and gone, and it was business as usual for the Cincinnati Bengals. No moves. We'll break that down and then reset. Where are the Bengals after dropping to 4-4 heading into the back half of the schedule?
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. In a bit of mourning, I think, is James Rapien. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, bringing you coverage of your Cincinnati Bengals every day, free and available everywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube. We appreciate all of you who subscribe and follow. Make sure you do that so we're delivered to your devices when we put up our new content every day. And hit the thumbs up button on YouTube. Make us your first listen on your way into work. We appreciate all of those good listening habits. Today's episode of Locked On Bengals is presented by PrizePicks, daily fantasy made easy. And first-time users will get a free instant deposit match of 100% up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. And I say, James, that you are in mourning because the Bengals didn't make a move. And I think that many Bengals fans were hoping that the Bengals would make a move. But when I said in the cold open that this is business as usual for the Cincinnati Bengals, that's what I mean. You go back throughout their history, mid-season trades for them are very uncommon, and especially uncommon when you talk about acquiring players from other teams to be buyers. And it was the most active trade deadline, I believe, in NFL history by a
10
wide
trades.
margin.
10 trades, Jake. 10.
And none of them
Not
were the
one,
Cincinnati
not two, not three,
Bengals.
not four, not five,
And
not six, not seven,
the
not
reason
eight,
that you would
not
hope
nine.
this year would be different is that you're in the middle of the rookie contract period for Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Burrow, specifically Joe Burrow. You have the cheap quarterback. You're coming off a Super Bowl year, but I guess the writing was on the wall here a little bit, man. You look at the team, they did spend in free agency a little bit, but they're 29th. Robert Mays and Paul Dehner Jr. pointed this out on the Athletic Football Show after the game. 29th in cash spend this year. I think we've talked about it as well. Maybe pinching pennies for some of those extensions where they're going to need cash. And this is why they fell short of our spending expectations in the offseason, because they broke a trend and decided to spend less this year. So these are the things that are frustrating about it, but this is kind of the way the team operates, right? You listen to Duke Tobin talk about his team building philosophy. He and the Bengals and Katie Blackburn and Troy Blackburn and Mike Brown, they're always taking this idea of consistency and this idea that they can build a team that's going to win year in, year out. And how's that gone? I mean, it's hard. It's this idea that on paper, I think sounds great. And then you see the reality of the NFL, and consistently winning in the NFL is something reserved for like Tom Brady and Bill Belichick and a handful of other teams in specific circumstances. And it's really, really hard to do. And so this could have been an opportunity for the Bengals to try to push a little bit harder on a rookie contract window. Look at Miami, by the way, who not as badly injured in many ways as the Bengals, made another move at the trade deadline, made big moves in the offseason, and have themselves back in a contending place in the AFC East. And there's two different approaches there between these teams, and I think that it'll be interesting to kind of see how those proceed, because they both drafted their quarterback in the same year, and they've taken different paths since then.
There's the right approach and there's the wrong approach, and the Bengals took the wrong approach. Here's why they took the wrong approach, and it's already done. Doesn't matter, because unless they win the Super Bowl this year, then I'm going to say they didn't do enough to put everything around Joe Burrow that they could have put around Joe Burrow. Yeah, Jamar Chase is coming back. Great. That's awesome. Good. That's awesome. I'm excited about that. You know what? You have to get to a point where you're still relevant when Chase does come back.
Well, and we hope he comes back, right?
Which sure, but that's what they're thinking. Like, that's their mindset internally is, oh, Jamar Chase is going to come back. That's why I clap for them. That's awesome news. Now, when he comes back, are you going to say, hey, carry us forever, even though you're still coming back? Like, it's your first game back. We need you to beat the Chiefs, because that's really hard to do. And so what I wanted today and we're recording this on Tuesday evening. Trade deadline was a couple hours ago. Looking at Chidobe Awuzie, who's out for the season, torn ACL, which we knew. Not sure if there's other damage. No, for sure it's a torn ACL. I thought, okay, well, maybe they add a corner or address wide receiver. Or, and here's the other thing, Jacoby Brissett was, I think, 17 of 22 and had all day long. He's still standing at First Energy Stadium waiting to get hit because I don't think he got touched on Monday night. Maybe another edge rusher. Someone with DJ Reader coming back, you're like, all right, well, let's bolster this pass rush. So there were multiple areas. It's not just one where I was like, oh, well, maybe the Bengals will add here. And I get it. Look, Bengals fans, I know that they don't normally make deals. And I've gotten a lot of comments, but I get that. They've also never had Joe Burrow. Never. Carson Palmer isn't Joe Burrow. Andy Dalton sure as hell wasn't Joe Burrow. And so when you have this quarterback who just lost his best weapon, and is by far their best weapon, this T Chase debate is silly. It was silly before the other night. It's certainly silly now.
There's a debate?
Oh, there were people last week. T's just as good as Chase. Yeah. Anyways.
They're good at different things. Let's leave it there. Continue.
Yeah. Love T, by the way. But you look at it and it's like, all right, give him a little something. Mm-hmm. And you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of something Andrew Whitworth said a couple of years ago. And I think it was when Burrow was a rookie. I think it was in 2020. I meant to look this quote up before we started recording. And he was like, there were a lot of times where we just wanted them to make that one move. And that was with Andy freaking Dalton at quarterback, that one move. And so there was the rumblings that Jerry Jeudy was available for a 2 and a 5. Oh my God, you can't do that. Who cares? Go in and try. And what to me is a pretty open season, right? I get it. The Bills are really, really good. And the Chiefs are superhuman at times. Guess what? You beat the Chiefs twice last year. Guess what? I think the Bills are still beatable. They're not undefeated. So why not try to make a move like that? And maybe it didn't have to be as splashy as the Jerry Jeudy move. But just add to your team, be a little aggressive, because that part of it, going for it a little bit, no one's going to rip you for it if it doesn't work. People rip you when it doesn't work, when you don't go for it. Because it's going to be much harder for Joe Burrow to get back to the Super Bowl now without Jerry Jeudy also on his roster, or without this defense having another pass rusher, or without a corner coming in that's a veteran that could potentially help. And look, I get it. Trades are hard to come by. They're hard to make work for a ton of reasons, from compensation to money to both sides needing to agree, all of those things. But they have multiple weaknesses now that I wouldn't have said were really weaknesses a few weeks ago, that are glaring holes that now suddenly Joe Burrow is going to have to mask and overcome. And that's the reality now. And that's a tough reality for most quarterbacks in the NFL, including Burrow.
Even like you said, it didn't have to be a splash move. Even if it's not Jerry Jeudy, maybe you think trading a second-round pick for a wide receiver isn't the right way to go about it. The Bears, for example, trading their own second-round pick for Chase Claypool wouldn't have made that trade. Myself, I will rip the Bears for doing that, even though they're trying to give Justin Fields help, for example. It gives me less faith they can do it right. Anyway, not about the Bears. If you're the Bengals, maybe it's not Jerry Jeudy, but maybe it's one of these smaller trades, a pick swap trade. Rashad Fenton. And I know the Bengals torched Rashad Fenton last year when he played for Kansas City, fell out of favor with the Chiefs. They prefer their rookies, gets traded for not a whole lot, 6th-round pick, expiring deal, right? But you need a little bit of help in your cornerback room. And maybe it's Sidney Jones. Maybe they go back to the Seattle waived cornerback as he was waived. The Bengals around 16th in waiver priority. We'll see. Maybe they put in a claim there because they do need corner help. We do know that. But Rashad Fenton's had an okay career. He's a veteran that's been around the league. He at least knows how to play the position. He might not be a world beater, but you need depth at that position at this point. So, even if we're talking about a trade like that did happen, then you're at least making your team a little bit better. You're addressing some issues on your team, because there's nothing coming. There are no reinforcements at corner right now, unless it is Sidney Jones. There's nobody waiting to be called up, and there's no DJ Reader coming back. There's no hope that Jamar Chase comes back at corner. Cheeto's got an ACL, and I wish him all the best, and I'm personally devastated by the loss because I love Chido as a player and I think he's a great person and I hope he gets better. But for the team, there's nothing coming there. And so that's where, like you said, James, like even if it was a small move to just reinforce, add depth, that would have been helpful for this team that's square in the middle of a contention window. Maybe we need to reset our expectations for the rest of the year, James. They have a lot of challenges to overcome, and I think it's worth talking about some of those as the Bengals and Bengals fans are reeling after a poor performance on Monday Night Football. We'll go there coming up next.
If you've ever thought about securing your home with home security, or maybe you've been putting it off, well, you need to listen up because right now SimpliSafe is offering their #1 rated home security system for 50% off. 50% off. Why? Because you're listening to Locked On Bengals. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you're not going to want to miss it because this isn't just some door sensors and window monitors. No, you're talking about professional security, whether it's their HD outdoor cameras that are going to notice any little twitch coming onto your property, or indoor cameras if you want to go that route, or it's their 24/7 professional monitoring. And that's the part of this is you're getting their monitoring agents who use Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe. They capture critical evidence to verify that the threat is real so you can get priority police response, which is such a huge thing if you're dealing with a real threat. So from their 24/7 professional monitoring, which is less than half the price of ADT, by the way, to their top-rated app, stay in complete control of your system anytime, anywhere. And don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I recommend and get 50% off any new SimpliSafe system at simplisafe.com/lockedonnfl. This is the biggest discount of the year. Don't wait. Again, it's simplisafe.com/lockedonnfl. There's no safe like SimpliSafe.
The Bengals are 4-4. They're 0-3 in the division. They're down 2 starting corners. Not that Eli Apple was playing all that well. Eli might be back too. And then it's Eli Apple, Cam Taylor, Britt, and then apparently Dax Hill. There's probably going to be somebody signed off the practice squad, I would imagine, once Chido heads to IR. DJ Reader could be back after the bye. Jamar Chase could be back after the bye. They have Carolina coming up, then they have Pittsburgh coming up, a couple of teams that aren't very good. And to me, James, 2 very important games.
Mm-hmm.
At 4-4, with the back half of their schedule they have coming up, where it still looks difficult. The Bengals, after last week's game, before we knew about Jamar Chase's injury, to me, before Chidobe Awuzie got hurt, to me, we're clearly in that second tier of NFL teams, where it seems like Buffalo, Kansas City, and Philadelphia are up at the top. I think all 3 of those teams made trades today, by the way. And then there's the
How does
second
that
tier
work?
where
Wait, you mean you're allowed to make trades? Go ahead.
believe it or not. And then there's the second
Shocker.
tier where a few teams have sort of started to emerge for me. Dallas, I think, one of them, surviving the Dak Prescott injury with a really nice defense this year. And the Bengals were there. And then after this week, without Jamar Chase, with the loss of Chidobe Awuzie, the way they looked, the way they couldn't bounce back from an opening drive interception, the way they couldn't protect, and really it was the tackles. And early in the game, it was a bit of everything. But as the game went on, man, the tackles had some real issues in this game that sped up Joe Burrow, that got Joe Burrow hit, that led to a turnover. And so they fell out of that second tier for me. They're back to this muddled middle where most of the NFL resides to me, where it's week to week. And yes, the Bengals on paper are a much better team than the Carolina Panthers, but going into this game, it feels like in any given Sunday situation for the Panthers, for the Steelers, you name a team, that's how I feel about the Bengals right now.
Yeah, I think it's fair. And that's why I think it's frustrating. Look, you mentioned Joe Burrow's rookie contract, excuse me. You only get so many years. And so this one, even though the injuries are real, right, to significant players, your best cornerback by far, your best weapon by far, and maybe your best player. Losing those guys, I was hoping for them to, instead of saying, man, injuries just sometimes they get in the way, which feels like that's going to be the narrative now. If they just continue to stay in this muddled middle, as you called it, and they're 8-9 or 9-8, and they just don't, and 9-8 might make the playoffs. Probably not, because they're not going to win any damn tiebreakers. But, if they end up missing the playoffs, it'd be like, oh, injuries. It's tough. Injuries. You can't have that with quarterbacks on your rookie. Like, I wanted them to push back at that and say, nope, we're not letting this happen. We're going to figure this out, and we're going to stay right where we deserve to be, which is in that tier of maybe not elite teams, but high-end teams that are certainly going to the playoffs. And now you're right. Now they're back in the middle, and I don't know if I'm picking them to beat Carolina. Carolina, and I get it, they're 2-6. I get how ugly things were. Did you see them the other day against Atlanta? And I get it, it's Atlanta, and the Bengals handled Atlanta with Jamar Chase, with Chidobe Awuzie. Who knows? All I know is PJ Walker can sling it. DJ Moore can run and catch, and they have a pretty good running game too. So I don't think this is going to be some easy game just because the Panthers are 2-6. So yeah, it's one of those things where now the Bengals are back with the pack, and it felt like, oh yeah, you could get to 6-3 at the bye and feel really good about yourself. Well, now you're 4-4, limping to the bye, and you have this team that's suddenly energized, even though they're 2-6, suddenly energized and hungry. And how do you respond? Can you get past them to get to 5-4? I was sort of hoping that they would bring some juice, so to speak, and inject a little life into this roster, and they didn't. And I think that matters. It does. If you're a Bengal today and they would have made a move, it wouldn't have just got the fan base excited. It would have gotten the team excited. Not that they need more motivation, but I think it helps in the middle of the year to make a move like that. And you just mentioned the teams that made trades. It's not like this was a bunch of, selling off, Bears to the insert whoever. I mean, the Ravens, they added a key piece, and that's your competition right now. And I think they're clearly not even looking at the BetOnline odds, just the Locked On Bengals, JR odds. The Ravens are clearly the favorites in the AFC North.
I don't think that's close. The Ravens schedule the rest of the year, and it is this year more than anything in any given Sunday league. The Ravens' losses, though, are against the Bills by 3, against the Dolphins when they were rolling by 4 in that weird game, and they lost to the Giants by 4, another weird game. The Ravens now play the NFC South. They have 3 games against NFC South opponents. They get the Jaguars, who can't figure it out. They get the Broncos, who just traded Bradley Chubb. And then they have some AFC North games in there too. But the remaining schedule for the Ravens doesn't threaten. And they, like you said, they made some moves to get a little bit better. It's a tough road ahead for the Bengals, with or without Jamar Chase. And, I think part of that is this coaching staff just needs to figure out, and Joe Burrow and these tackles need to figure out, what is our offense? What is our go-to when we need it without Jamar Chase? And right now, it doesn't really feel like they have that answer. Tyler Boyd early in the game was kind of that answer. The first drive of the game, he made a couple of outstanding plays. First couple of drives of the game did Tyler Boyd. But, if the run game isn't going to work and you can't run the ball and you don't have Jamar Chase, you got to figure something out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got to come quickly, or the season's just going to get away from you. 2-3 in the conference. 2 of their wins are they're 2-0, 2-1, sorry, against NFC opponents. And it's just a hard road, right? Yeah. And so this is a culmination of off seasons, of the approach, of the philosophy, and really probably held captive by the moment here, really reinforcing those off-season narratives of injury regression, kicker regression, with Evan McPherson missing kicks this season. Yesterday, certainly wasn't a good game for him. Wasn't a good game for Kevin Huber either. We didn't really talk about either of those things too much yesterday, but all of these regression factors are talking about the deep ball not being there as consistently for the team. last few weeks notwithstanding, especially without Jamar Chase. So lots of obstacles for this team to overcome.
No doubt about it. And I want to continue. Let's talk about the kicker in special teams. Let's do a little bit of that because, I'm not really worried about Evan. But Kevin, a bit worried about. All right, let's dive into PrizePicks because PrizePicks is daily fantasy done right. And if you haven't tried PrizePicks yet, we've been talking about it a lot right here on Locked On Bengals. And our listeners that have tried it somehow, some way, find a way to win all the time. And what you do with PrizePicks, you pick 2 to 5 players, and if they're going to score more or less than their projection, that's it. Who's their projection from? PrizePicks. PrizePicks sets the projection. You pick more, you pick less. You can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. Excuse me. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport you watch. Obviously, the NFL, also NBA, Major League Baseball, PGA, college football, college hoops, which are right around the corner, and so much more. So check them out now. PrizePicks and the PrizePicks app. And all you have to do is download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up to play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. So if you deposit $50 or $100, guess what? You're going to get 50 or 100. You're going to double it with code Locked On at prizepicks.com or the PrizePicks app. Again, promo code Locked On for an instant deposit match up to $100.
I'm also not too terribly concerned about Evan McPherson, but he hasn't been as consistent this year. And the one area of his game that he actually needed to improve, which is specifically kicking field goals in the like the 40 to 49 yard part of the field, where you shouldn't be kicking that many field goals because you should be going for it in many of those situations. It hasn't really improved. He's 4 of 6 from that part of the field. Still great from 50 plus, still a weapon. So I don't say that to rag on Evan, but he's 11 of 14 this year. He had the one blocked. He had the high snap issues. He's 17 of 19 on PATs. Yesterday wasn't a good game for him, and there has been a little bit of regression there. Some of that has to do with the operation and not McPherson, to be clear. They do have a bit of a problem at long snapper, I think, which doesn't totally excuse Evan McPherson, but it is a factor. But you're right, James. The bigger issue, well, and again, like you shouldn't be punting that.
If Evan makes that field goal the other day, his percentage is higher than last year. Like I don't even know if there is regression. I think but he missed the whole operation. Yeah, but the whole operation sucked week 1. So if that didn't happen, then we're not talking about regression. Like he had a crappy game. He was awful on Monday. I don't even think it's a year thing. I think it's a bad Monday thing. So we'll see. But I wouldn't go much farther than that as of now. He hasn't had as many opportunities either. Zach Taylor hasn't taken the points in some of those situations. And so, he's only kicked 14 field goals. We're halfway through the season.
Not terribly concerned about Evan McPherson, but more concerned, I think, generally about Kevin Huber. And again, where I was starting was shouldn't be punting all that much with this team, but they are. That's the team they are this year. They're punting a lot, and 37.3 yards average net for Kevin Huber. And it's seeming to get worse as the season goes on. He had a couple nice games at the beginning of the year, and since then it's been rough for Kevin Huber.
Yeah, it's been really rough. And I do wonder how long the leash is at this stage and how much is it, a lot of people continue the narrative of the holding thing, but Drew Chrisman was fine holding for Evan McPherson all throughout camp, all throughout the preseason. And so that part of it, is that really an issue? Or is it simply they thought that Kevin Huber was going to be more reliable? Because he hasn't. I mean, I'm going to need you to put in, even as, what was it, second punt or third punt on Monday night? Like he punted it and it was fair caught at like the 19 or the 21. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, well that might, I think it was the 21 because it wouldn't count inside the 20. And I'm like, Well, that's okay. But you really need that 10 yards farther. Like it needs to be at the 11. And it's just, to me, I think it might be about that time for Drew Chrisman to get a shot. But, you stick with what you know when you're trying to hold on, and you try to stick with familiarity. I just hope that the Bengals don't get burned for their loyalty if they go that route. And look, if they were going to make a move, I think we would have probably heard about it on Tuesday. Didn't hear a move. So I imagine that he's going to punt again this week.
Yeah, it looks like the leash is at least long enough for this week, but just some numbers on Kevin Huber. And this is, I don't want to rip the guy too much. He's been a fixture in Cincinnati for so long, UC kid and everything, but 4.29 second hang time is 25th in the NFL. The average yards per return on a Kevin Huber punt is 15 and a half yards. That's second worst in the NFL. And you can't have that when you're only your net punting average 37.3 yards, like I mentioned earlier, is second worst in the NFL. Your raw yards per punt, second worst in the NFL. Just hasn't been a good enough year for Kevin Huber, and this is pretty far down on the list of big issues with this team. But we said we were going to talk about it yesterday, and we didn't quite get to it. And I don't know what it is with this front office and giving special teamers maybe the veterans one more year than they should, but it seems like it's happened again here.
Yeah, it does. And the 23-yard punt is just,
yeah.
Like, and for those that didn't see, I just smacked my face, basically. Put both hands on my head. I saw that and I was like, are you kidding? Like, that can't happen. Because you know what? Drew Chrisman, if he gets in, he's not going to be perfect, right? He's going to screw up some. He's a young punter. But he also has way more. He can punt the ball 60 yards. So if both guys are going to screw up some, why not have the guy that can at least boom it when you need him to boom it, when your offense isn't moving the ball and you're punting from your own goal line, right? And so at some point, you may have to roll that way. And we could talk about the holding thing all day long, but I agree with you, by the way. I think snapper, that was a problem with that extra point. And it was a little bit of a high snap, and we've seen a couple of those. You noticed them first with Cal Adamitis. It's who they got now. Clark Harris isn't walking through that door.
Yeah, it's just gonna be what they have to deal with, I guess. It's unfortunate that it is what it is, but he needs to clean it up, or they need to find a new long snapper in the middle of the season, and that's probably going to be pretty challenging. I would imagine. I mean, maybe it's not been all bad. It's just there's this trend of high snaps, and the hold is getting down, but who knows what, if anything, is throwing McPherson off on some of these kicks where he hasn't been able to make them. Could be snap related. It's part of the operation, right? And so we're speculating. I'm not a special teams expert enough at all to say whether or not it's impacting things, but it is something that, as you said, we've noticed.
You know what I am an expert of?
Wide
trades.
receiver.
And I was ready to talk about a trade. I was excited to talk about a trade and to just put a bow on the show. A little frustrated that they weren't able to pull off any kind of trade. Heck, by the way, what if it was, and Albert Breer floated this out last week, what if you just traded Brandon Wilson and got a pick?
Yep.
Right?
It's very much the Bengals approach we've seen forever, where they just kind of like are toeing the line and trying to stay in the middle a little bit, right? And so they're not trading Jesse Bates to try to get a pick a year earlier, and I don't know if they could. They're not trying to trade any of their veterans.
Would you have traded Jesse Bates and a pick for DJ Moore? Would you have done that?
Sure. I mean, it's harder because I do think Jesse Bates is really important to the defense. When Chase comes back, you have these four receivers. You have to figure out how to get them on the field. You have the depth issues at corner where Dax Hill is now playing corner. So now it's a bit harder. But if Jesse Bates isn't part of your future plans, DJ Moore then becomes part of your future plans instead of T. Higgins, probably. So I don't know. Maybe there's some factors there I didn't consider. in terms of like the long term, because Moore just signed an extension, right? And so like I don't know if that one quite makes sense.
I was
I
just
would have
curious.
to think about it more.
And Carolina might not be interested in that. I was just curious.
Probably not,
I don't
because
know.
they just extended DJ Moore, and
yeah, and they also traded for Baker. I mean, things change quick. Who knows if they're.
And then they fired their coach, and
Maybe they really like Jesse Bates.
Carolina's a mess.
Would you have traded Bates for Cooks?
I don't. I mean,
I'm just asking.
I just don't think. I don't know. I think if I trade Bates, I'm looking for a pick. To be honest, I'm looking for a high pick, because I know that doesn't do anything for this season, but at least it's picking a direction. And maybe they feel like, they're going to get some guys back and they'll be able to figure it out in the secondary. And Jesse Bates is a big part of what they're going to need to do with the corner depth being what it is. I don't know if those moves are necessarily moves that would make the Bengals better.
I wouldn't have done it for Cooks. I would have given up a pick for Cooks. I wouldn't have done it for Cooks. DJ Moore is different. DJ Moore,
he's a long-term piece.
He's a legit. Yeah. DJ Moore's a baller, man. So,
but again, that trade would be a decision on T. Higgins, because you're not paying T. Higgins at that point. There's no way, because I think there's 2-3 more years on DJ Moore's deal at big dollars.
T. Higgins doesn't need an extension this offseason necessarily.
It means he's probably not getting extended, though. Realistically,
sure. No, potentially. I also crossed that bridge. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing is, like, it's almost like, of course, we get to this 32 minutes in the show. Like,
yeah,
this franchise is like, okay, well, we got to get all these sponsors and get ready, and we got to pay Burrow, and we got to keep these guys together. And it's like, that's great. That's awesome. Well, guess what? 2022 is now. It's right now. And you got to plan for 2023 and 2024 to an extent. Also, got to try to win now, because the reason everyone's there is in going to Paycor Stadium, and it's going to be sold out again and just packed for a Panthers team that's 2-6 on Sunday, is because of what you did in the now last year when you started selling all those tickets. You went to the Super Bowl. So you have to keep that kind of success. And so, if you watch this team at all, have you ever thought that? Maybe there was a 2-week window and really like a 5-quarter window where they come back against the Saints and then they handle business against the Falcons. So for 5 quarters out of 8 games, have they looked like the team that we thought they could potentially be this season? And they didn't make a move at the deadline. That's all.
It's a continuation of some long-term trends a little bit. The offense has struggled too often for myriad reasons. They've had these slow starts. They've not been able to figure it out against Cleveland. They've not been able to figure it out against elite edge rushers or Aaron Donald. Elite rushers, I guess. I mean, there are just some trends, right, that we continue to see and that they need to deal with, because they've got themselves in a hole this year. And a lot of it is self-inflicted. You can say they beat themselves in a couple of these early 1-score losses, especially against Pittsburgh. You could even say it against Baltimore, the way they started that game. Last night, they got punched in the mouth, man. They got dominated in the trenches. They got bodied at the tackle position on offense. And, I mean, what a running game clinic from the Browns they put on, especially in that second half. I know the game went exactly the way they wanted it to go, but that wasn't the Bengals beating themselves. There weren't penalties and Joe Burrow throwing the ball straight at defenders. That was a poor
desperate
effort.
Team. A desperate team coming out with way more intensity and desire.
Somebody pointed out the last few times the Bengals have played the Browns in this sort of situation is right after, a week after the Browns lose an AFC North game, when they are back against the wall. But you got to be ready for that, man. I mean, you got to be able to beat the Browns.
How many times did I say it last week that it wasn't going to be this walk in the park, easy does it? Like, if I see it, they have to know that. Like,
yeah. Well,
that's the part that really bothered me, honestly, was the fact that Jamar Chase is out, your best player. And everybody all week is like, yeah, we're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. Shouldn't you have a chip on your shoulder? Like, if I was T or Tyler, and I'm not saying they weren't, or Joe, or insert whoever, I'd be like, look, Jamar's great. We're pretty bleeping good too. And like, that would be like my mind. Like, I'd want to just flex on him. Oh my, and I thought Boyd was going to. I thought he was going to have a huge day. And then it all came crashing down.
Well, and T had a touchdown on that first series, if not like a 40-yard catch. That was,
Sure.
I just watched it again right before we started recording. That was really bad. But, and we talked about it going into the game. You have one game record. There's a blueprint for teams now. If you have a game record on the defensive line, play cover 2, rush 4, let your game record, Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, TJ Watt, let him go wreck Joe Burrow, speed his clock up, whatever it is. Make Joe Burrow throw it behind the line of scrimmage, make him check it down. The Bengals, again, in this game, I think didn't do a good enough job early with putting defenders in conflict to make Joe Burrow's life a little bit easier. And I think they need to do that right now. With the way their tackles are playing without Jamar Chase, they need to make Joe Burrow's life a little bit easier. And, let him do his Superman thing, but make his life easier on the way to do it. And that's what this team's going to probably need to do until some of these guys come back, if they come back. And we'll see with Jamar Chase. I don't know anything, to be clear. I'm just saying we'll see. I hope he's back. They're hoping that he's back as well. And they just need to make some adjustments until then. Anyway, James, we've gone on long enough here. We're rambling a little bit. We've got Julian Council tomorrow for our crossover Thursday. It's already that time. Man, weeks go fast when they're short weeks. So crossover Thursday coming tomorrow. We'll get into the Carolina Panthers and everything going on with the Christian McCaffrey-less PJ Walker quarterbacked team in Carolina. Until then, Bengals fans, thanks for listening to the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.